Hello and welcome to Xena Warrior Podcast Minisodes. My name is Vera and I'm joined as always by my two artistic co-hosts, Katie.
Hello.
And Livy.
Hello. Artistic.
Yes.
Artistes.
You're artistes. We're all artistes. Everyone's an artiste. Mm. And
Podcastiste.
Yes. And we'll talk about some more artistes, as that is technically the theme, but like in a roundabout way. Yes.
Intriguing.
All the
roundabout
films.
Artistes.
Yeah, we're going to discuss films that involve various art forms, whether it's directing the film or
the art of directing the film,
being acting in it, and various other things, but also within the context of the stories themselves. There are artistes
about our art that are arts.
Yes.
Made by artistes.
Yes.
And we're podcastistes.
You got it. We have portrait painting, we have a performance art, we have photography,
fossil,
findingness. You gotta remove
of the fossil.
Remove the dirt from the fossil to make it pretty. Well, you know what? I think she was selling like bracelets and stuff made out of them.
Yeah, that's true.
So there you go.
They were like trying to put her in a box.
So there.
A box of artists.
All sorts of artistry from your favorite podcasties.
Favorite. With a U.
Okay, so today we have a fun topic, and it's from one of our patrons. Liv, take it away.
Catherine, not this Catherine.
Not me.
would like us to talk about The Handmaiden.
Is it Catherine Janeway?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Thank you, Catherine. Woo!
Thank you, Catherine. The prompt is clean and simple.
Yes.
The Handmaiden.
And we made it just dirty and not simple because we brought in other
We love to make things hard for ourselves. So if you're not aware, The Handmaiden is a film.
Made by artistes.
Made by artistes. It's a Korean film from 2015.
We're going to be talking about it, but also we will be talking about other, I guess like 2015 sort of started,
Actually, 2016.
Okay, well, 2015 is when Carol came out.
That's why I said 2015.
And Carol, as we all know, is the beginning of the lesbian revolution of
the way we actually
cinema.
mark time.
The first movie ever made.
BC, before Carol.
Yes, exactly. So, after that, it's technically sad when you think about all the movies that come out per year. However, in a very small, in the queer cinema world, I guess, it's amazing because you got suddenly one big giant movie per year was coming out with big actors and things like that. So it was really exciting, and it all started with Carol. So we'll be talking about several of these that have come out since then.
And what are these? I feel like there's a very specific genre that we are discussing.
Well,
Liv,
you sort of coined a very amazing term for this, which is that for the most part, a lot of them are ladies coming out of the corset.
Coming out of the corset.
Because a lot of them are period pieces for the most part.
Yeah. We're kind of extending the umbrella to include some exceptions that maybe don't quite count as period
but we
pieces.
just want to mention them.
But yeah, I remember when Carol came out. How
you don't wear corsets
in Carol,
right? Well, yeah,
no corset.
They could have some
Carol
kind
is
of
a bit later, some shapewear.
Yeah.
Coming out of the shapewear doesn't quite have the same ring to it.
Anyway, Carol's hose that she wore.
But yeah, I remember when Carol came out, it was a big deal because this was major Hollywood stars and there was Oscar buzz, though as you may recall, not as much as there should have been.
Hated on because it was cold.
Well, we'll talk about that.
Yes, we will.
Yeah, that is definitely one of the things I'd like to discuss. I'm glad that already, just in a few short years since 2015, already I feel Carol's reputation has begun to change. People see that this movie is very important and definitely will be fixed as the first, the first of a long line of lesbian period drama.
And definitely the only one that has become like a staple to watch every Christmas, a Christmas movie.
It's the only one.
Christmas Carol.
The only one that's a Christmas movie. I think of these. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, but since our prompt is The Handmaiden, we will begin there.
Start there.
So, The Handmaiden. This is a Korean film, as you mentioned, directed by Chan-wook Park. And it is, technically speaking, an adaptation of Fingersmith by Sarah Waters.
Yes.
Yeah, this is kind of a very cool situation in which you have a source material, which is Victorian set about white ladies, and this is the only movie on our list that is not starring white ladies.
That's true.
So I think it's cool that Park has like transmuted this source and like added a bunch of interesting elements to it, because now suddenly it has like imperialism thrown into it.
Yeah. The setting is. Oh, I'm sorry, Katie. Were you
I was just gonna quickly say, like, maybe it'll come up as we talk, but we've mentioned Sarah Waters before.
Yes.
And I think we've
Tipping the Velvet.
Yeah, so just wanted to like remind everyone, if you haven't yet seen or read any of her books or seen Tipping the Velvet, go do it.
Yeah, I mean, Tipping the Velvet, we said it was like early 2000s, something like that. But I think that kind of started like Sarah Waters' renaissance on for like BBC at least, and there was a Fingersmith adaptation
with what is her name? Sally Hawkins. Yes.
Oh, right, that's right.
As Sue.
Yes. I was going to say who was in Blue Jasmine, Cate Blanchett, who was in Carol.
Random fun fact about Fingersmith, the book. It is on David Bowie's list of 100 books you must read.
Wow.
So that's his favorite.
Wow.
I don't know if it's number one on the list.
But his favorite of the Sarah Waters, presumably.
Yeah, there was no other Sarah. I checked to make sure there was any other Sarah Waters on there. But I think it is sort of widely regarded as one of her best.
It was my favorite of hers when I read some of them back in the day, but I do think my opinion about it has changed somewhat, in part from seeing all these adaptations.
I feel like there's been so many adaptations of this book, but at the same time, there's only been
many is two.
And I feel like for me, that's like too many. Like,
wow,
but I'm gonna rein it in. Just like as a quick, I guess, summary.
Yes. This is a hard to summarize movie because there are 3 different narratives.
Oh, God. Should I be the one doing this?
No, you are the person who does the plots, Vera.
All right, let me take a crack at it. All right, so this is, in general, all right, diluting it down to source and various adaptations. But you have a character who is kind of like from like a poor family.
Sue/Suki.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whose mother was like hanged for various crimes, trying to survive and whatnot. And she has various pickpocketing and street smart capabilities. And she gets into some sort of deal with this guy who was going to pretend to be a count in order to get this very rich lady thrown into a mental
First to fall in love with him.
Yes, right. She's supposed to help the rich lady help the count and her fall in love.
Vera's sweating.
Oh, God.
I'm
like literally sweating.
This
is so hard. So anyway, and then they're going to throw this rich lady into the mental institution and like get her money. So that's like...
That's the first.
The first sort of plot.
Yeah.
Then it turns out, yes, you take over.
Well, do we want to? We don't want to. I feel like people who are listening may not have seen this movie, so I don't want to give it all away too much.
Okay,
maybe we'll have to do like spoilers, because there's not.
Okay, well, we can just say there's another twist.
There are twists.
There are twists. Yeah. This thing is notorious for twists.
We'll do an alert spoiler zone.
Yeah,
to talk about like. Because we have to talk about the ending.
I don't think it's a spoiler to say that the 2 ladies fall in love.
Yes, that's true. That's pretty central.
Sure.
That was some
the original setup does lead to that.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, this is definitely a movie and a book that plays with kind of your expectations. Like you're presented with one version of events and then you are eventually given something completely different.
Right.
And then Chan-wook Park goes one step further and gives you a third version of events.
So that's not in the book.
That is not in the book.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. I liked that. And so we talked about how it's a fascinating adaptation because it's taking like Victorian English setting and transferring it to colonial Korea in the 1930s. So you have Japanese rule, and for us, like it was interesting to see like they did two different types of subtitles, like Japanese subtitles and Korean subtitles, color coded, so you know. That was really cool. And in general, it was just such a far away setting from Victorian England, which, you know, as far as BBC things go, like you're just used to that setting. So it was really cool to see it in a completely new light and with a completely new culture to explore. There's a really fun fact where Chan-wook Park took the script to Sarah Waters, and she was like, she liked it, but she was like, let's not call it an adaptation. Let's call it inspired by Fingersmith. So that's, I don't know what that says.
Yeah, I mean,
it's its own thing. I think that's what it means. I think she was just like, whoa, this is different. And
maybe she wanted to give him kind of her approval to just kind of go with it.
I mean, he did go with it.
It's a fairly close adaptation, like in many ways.
Yeah,
it just happens to kind of veer in a few key places.
All right, so The Handmaiden. We have really cute heroine, Suki. She's very sweet. There's a lot of babies that are immediately around. I mean, yeah, yes and no. I mean, she's still sweet, I think.
Yeah.
Because, like, look at her face. It's cute.
Her face is very cute. And yeah, but it is interesting that she, I think in the very first shots of the movie, she's introduced with these, like, you know, fussing over, saying goodbye to these babies.
Yeah, so many cute babies.
And then just a few scenes later, you find out, you know, that wasn't her family.
Yeah.
So I like that. Like, from the get-go, you have this sense of, like, the rug being pulled out from under you. You see a girl kissing babies. You're like, oh, those are her babies. Or, you know, her, at least her siblings. So then, no, absolutely not. They're, like, commodities being sold to Japan.
Yeah.
Because imperialism.
But many levels, because she still liked the babies. So it's not, like, completely evil. So then you meet, like, the Count. I liked his outfits, his chapeau, but, you know, already I'm like, I don't like this guy, and I didn't like him in Fingersmith either.
I think, he just, like, exudes, like, don't trust this man.
I don't like a smarmy dude. And then the rich character, Lady Hideko, what do we think of her?
When we first meet her, she's like, I feel this, you know, like a trope. I think literally the first time you, like, meet her is her, like, having a nightmare and needing to be comforted. And you're like, oh, this is one of those kind of Victorian tropes, you know, the lady who's very delicate, you know, already, you know, halfway there for getting sent to the mental institution, which, you know, is the end game here. So she seems very delicate and remote at first. But, dun, dun, dun.
There was a lot of that. Like, you go into that, like, house and everything is...
Can we talk about that?
Yes,
because that I thought was such a cool metaphor for the movie and this whole process that Chan-wook Park is kind of doing here, in that the rich uncle's house is half Japanese, because they're fancy Japanese people living in Korea, but then half English, in the English style. Yeah. And I thought that was very neat for this movie that is itself a kind of hybrid, because it's partially Sarah Waters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really cool. And I mean, just in general, like the location was quite mysterious and exquisite.
Yeah. All these movies, which we're going to be talking about, have, like, a very clear sense of place, which I guess makes sense because they're all set in the past. But, yeah, I feel that here, Handmaiden, like, for me, when I imagine Handmaiden, it's, like, that very elaborate library set.
Yes.
Where a lot of the action takes place. And I say action, meaning action. And then, like, that tree, which you later find out Hideko's aunt hung herself from.
Yes.
So. Yeah, important tree.
Yeah, there's a lot of like little clues sort of set up in the first part where Suki finds like this big rope kind of like hidden, and then
in like a hat box.
Yeah, and then she finds these like Benoit balls, and it's like, what is this? What's going on? Not to mention the library set where you said the uncle and his crazy mouth. That's like
you were
black.
very obsessed with the black mouth.
I was
the uncle.
freaking out.
That's odd.
And then I was like kind of disappointed at like what it was.
What it actually turned out to be.
Yeah, I thought it was like, what did I thought it was like squid ink or something.
Oh, well.
But it wasn't. It was just regular ink. But like, what an amazing detail. I thought that was really just incredible.
This movie's full of amazing details.
Yeah.
Like again, most of these movies are kind of going to have like a hashtag aesthetic
Right,
to
yeah.
them. The Handmaidens like is very into like frippery, like stuff. I mean, it turns out to be part.
It's into stuff. Yeah,
It turns out to be part of the plot. That's actually like it turns out that Suki is almost being seduced by stuff.
Yeah.
That turns out to be a thread. So, like, going through her mistress's shoes and all her clothes. And there's this really intriguing, kind of kinky sequence where she imagines Hideko as, like, a doll that she's dressing and, like, like a toy just for her. And you're like, this is weird, but hot. But confusing.
I just remember that part of the seduction dates that the Count had with Hideko, where that they had like art classes together.
Yeah, that's a good detail. Yeah, and Hideko's
real bad,
really bad at the art.
Yeah,
really bad.
But she's really good at like performance art,
as we eventually find out.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is sort of like part 2 of the movie, and I mean, is this the spoilery section where we can talk about?
We are going to talk about Act 2
of the Handmaiden. Blanket spoiler alert.
Yeah. Part 2 is from Hideko's point of view, which is very, like, Tarantino-esque.
Yes, I thought of Tarantino as, in part because it has these, like, title cards, which just somehow...
As we know, Tarantino
invented the title card.
Yeah, but I get that, yeah.
Yeah, so you get the whole kind of first half, but like from this other character's point of view, and you find out that, whoa...
You thought Suki was trying to get Hideko committed to the mental institution. Well, guess what? The exact opposite is suddenly happening.
Yeah.
But this is an intriguing... This immediately makes the movie... I don't know. The first time I saw it, I was actually disappointed by this second part. In part because I had gotten invested into the Suki story and like kind of just cared about the relationship as depicted in part 1. Mm-hmm. So when you go into part 2, which is kind of about something completely different, one lady and her journey into becoming a performance artist for porn. You're like,
that's one way to put it.
I mean, that's a pretty cool story.
And sexual exploitation.
Yeah. Yes.
Also.
Yes.
I mean, part 1, from Suki's perspective, like, she's supposed to help the Count seduce Hideko, but while doing so, she falls in love with her and is herself seduced, and
feels really bad, like is very guilty about the whole driving her mad.
Yeah, she starts being like,
thing.
She starts being not into it, like genuinely. And you have like a sex scene where Hideko's like, oh, what's it gonna be like on our first night with the Count? Is he gonna be like this? I'm so me.
You get the sense. I mean, you eventually find out that she is pretending to be innocent. It's safe to say.
Oh yeah.
But I think it is interesting the way that the power dynamic shifts there. Mm-hmm. You think to begin with that Suki is the worldly one. She's this thief. She's there to do this con. And then there's Hideko, who is this like, complete innocent in her white gowns. And then of course it turns out that Hideko is very, very far from innocent, or at least from, like, she is more worldly than Suki, and in the sex scene is actually way more knowledgeable than she is, but is pretending not to be.
Yeah, because, I mean, like, in part 2, you find out that, she's been indoctrinated into this crazy world that the uncle orchestrates for her and her aunt. Since she was very small, he's been, like, training them to be performance artists for his porn parties that he has. Like, he collects erotica, but, like, rare erotica from around the world, I guess. So you have, like, very specific things. And does he also write some because of his mouth?
Yes,
and the ink in his mouth?
He
writes his own porn, and he has
and draws his art.
His fan art.
Which I think is part of isn't it? That's one of the things between the book and the movie, since the book is a book and very, like, about words more so, that, like, it becomes a little bit more about art and visuals in the movie.
Yeah, that's actually a big component of the plot in the book, is that Sue can't read and hence does not know that the books are pornography.
Yeah.
Here, it's a little bit like if Suki ever actually looked at the books, it would be really clear.
You see a photo of a tentacle porn happening.
Whoa, what is this about?
Yeah. Which is a cool thing for
the visuals are great. And I mean, her, as you say, it does feel almost like performance art in that these moments of exploitation are quite visually striking, especially the scene where Hideko mounts this wooden puppet. And I don't even really know what that's about.
But I mean, they're, like, trained to, like, it's not like part of the training sequence was, like, you can't just read it. You have to, like, really sell it. And they have to sell it to these fancy gentlemen that the uncle invites, and they sit there socially distanced, and they sweat and get horny. And it's really gross.
But they are sort of, they're arranged staring right into the lens, just as you jokers in the movie theater would have been staring right into the screen. The movie is very conscious, of, like, these multiple layers of watching and performance. Like, you see Hideko learning to be a good performer of the pornography. And that Hideko herself has been performing with Suki.
Yes.
And maybe performing this whole second half of the movie to us to trick us into thinking something's going on that isn't.
What is real?
Like, there's a lot of meta layers to what we're seeing.
Which is probably why I have such a hard time with fingersmith. It's too much for my little brain.
Oh, no. I mean, it does have a lot of, I think there is just, like, on a personal level, like, if the way that one reacts to stories and stuff, it's not that, like, it's like, oh no, you said your little brain can't handle it. I think, I think this movie is, like, a very well made, like, good movie. And the book, too, is also, like, craft-wise, probably one of her best, but it's not my favorite, just because, like, I like things to be a little, like, messier, and, like, I think that it's too, like, there's so many twists and so many things going on that, like, it keeps me at a little more of a distance, which is maybe, like, part of the experience, and that's fine, but that's, like a personal hurdle, and not necessarily something about the... that's me. That's just me.
Yeah. I think that's me as well. And I think it's what Liv said, which is that, you get invested in this one version of the story.
Get ready for version 2.
You sort of like both of them, et cetera.
You're intrigued by version 2? Well, buckle up. It's time for version 3.
Okay, and then what?
Yeah, that's right. So
I'm pretending as a version 3 is somehow like a complete inversion of what you've seen, but only in the sense that you think in part 2 that Hideko is working along with
the Count
to institutionalize Suki. It turns out, no, of course not. Like, at some point that you have not been allowed to see, Suki confesses to Hideko. They realize they're on the same side and that the men suck, and hooray, they take back the narrative and become the heroes. which is wonderful to see and does feel like a good ending to the movie. But it is one of those moments where you're like, well, wow, I like that story. Why have I watched all these other ones where the men were in charge?
But they have such a great comeuppance at the end. I mean, like the crazy uncle, he like tortures the count literally by like chopping off his fingers, and then he's gonna go for his dick, and then the count like smokes these like mercury cigarettes and kills them both.
Death by cigarette is pretty great.
It was like a torture dungeon, and there's like a big octopus there.
As there should be.
As there should be.
Because we've seen it in the art.
We've seen it in the art, which is it's a reference to like a real art from like the 1700s. Oh. Tentacle porn art.
Hey, yeah. Tentacle porn has been around a long time.
Long time. Ever since there were fishermen has there been tentacle porn. So
let's get,
yeah,
go for it.
I feel that, the scene that we haven't discussed at length and is in many ways the most memorable scene in the movie, so great, you see it twice, is the sex scene, which we've discussed a little bit in terms of like the characters, who's deceiving who, but you have to talk about just the choreography and the filmmaking of both these two scenes. It is elaborate.
Oh, yeah. Well, but I think, even before we get into that, I think that what we should talk about a little bit more, or maybe we can talk about the sex scene and then talk about the other stuff. What am I trying to say? Well, anyway, the setup of the characters mostly in part one, which is the part that I think we're kind of all saying we sort of like the best because you get invested in it in that way, is the more, I don't know what is the right word? Is it subtle? I don't know if that's the right word. Discreet?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's sexier stuff in the
part
setup and like meeting and relationship of these characters.
You like
that is
the
much more
scene.
physically intimate and hotter and sexier.
The scene where she sucks on a lollipop and Suki's like, "You can be my baby."
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Making sure I understand.
That is the best scene. That's the best scene in the movie, maybe.
I prefer You're My Doll.
That's a good one too. And I think that's to do with like where the like formal kind of style of the movie like really like jumps out. And there's a lot of really cool like mirroring shots of them where they're like both like from behind. There's one with and their hair's like done the same and like lots of mirrors and things and like just like even the undoing of corsets, like just that very like that stuff is really good, and the two women like have really great chemistry together in those scenes. So I feel like the sex scenes are interesting and more complicated as part of the broader plot of the movie, and like the stuff that it's dealing with her being brought up and groomed to be in this really gross world of pornography and erotica and mans. They function differently, and therefore they're very distancing to me and like not sexy, and we can talk about them.
Now that I'm thinking about it,
they're very complicated to me.
The way that you just described it makes me think that like, part one and part two literally like shift as far as not tone but style.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like Kill Bill Part 1 versus Kill Bill Part 2. It's like Part 1's like wuxia films and whatnot, and then Part 2 is like more westerns. And like if you like Part 1, you go into the theaters for Part 2, you're like, oh, okay.
And I do think different. The fact that the style is subtly different in Part 1 and Part 2 leads to, you see the sex scene twice, and the style of the sex scene itself shifts between the parts. You see,
I mean, for the most part, like, you still get the big close-up between the legs.
Yeah. Well, that's how it ends, I think, in Part 1. Yeah. You get the vagina point of view shot. But then in Part 2, you get this much more sort of formalized mirroring, scissoring.
I mean, it is
69ing.
Well, yeah. Let's just say what it is. Like, it's just they're just doing like all the things you've seen in porn.
Yeah, because the Part 2 is
all about porn.
So it makes sense that suddenly the sex scene is kind of being portrayed in these intense pornographic kind of tropes.
Yeah.
And how you react to that, I think, is definitely, like a personal thing.
There's so many levels to this. It's not
Yeah.
even funny.
Well, it's part one, the sex scene was from, Suki was like the one who was...
Her perspective.
It's her knowledge and
The
what she
power
was
dynamics
doing.
in this movie
Yeah.
are, if you like that, yes.
And then in part,
watch this movie.
Part two, Hideko takes over and all she knows is like literally everything you can think of as far as porn goes.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
she brings
And
it all to
those
the
are
table.
the terms she brings to the sex scene.
Right, which in a way, so this is like the way that, like, I like that scene. I mean, I think that that's, like, given the relationship between them, and this is, like, her agency and her doing it, and she's not performing for, I mean, I guess she's performing for us.
I guess, yeah, I mean, sure.
But that it's like, you know, there's an agency there, and like this is stuff she knows, and she's like sort of like reclaiming it for herself. I do just think that, and it's a little easy to kind of look at it and go like, well, he like kind of tipped things over like too far into like a spectacle-y porn situation. That feels like too easy to say, but sometimes I think that's a little true. As well.
Yeah.
Well, it is distant. I mean, we keep talking about that distance. I definitely feel distance from that scene. Like, I feel like I lose the thread that it's about these two characters finding each other and having this moment of connection into this more like, whoa,
exactly.
Wow.
It's that, exactly. And that's kind of what does not work about it. And despite all of the positions and things that they're doing that are mirroring this erotica and art and stuff, like being, you know, what they are, like you just sort of lose the characters.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel organic.
No.
in the slightest. Like it's just like,
and I actually find the punchline a little bit, it almost like breaks the fourth wall in a way that hurts the scene. In the second time you see the sex scene, you have Suki saying something like, wow, you're a really, like, quick learner.
Yeah.
And
Hideko's like, I know! It's funny, but it somehow breaks the logic, because you're like, Suki, why is Suki being so obtuse right here? Like, it just, I don't know.
Well, she didn't know. I accepted it.
It, like, verged on parody in a way that I thought actually hurt the scene. But that's kind of what that scene is like, is it's like teetering on this line of just being funny.
I'm very like I don't know, very complicated feelings about it, because I understand like the art as in what we're doing, the director's doing, and like how it's like tied to the story, like with the porn and everything like that, and how what we just talked about, how part two is like from Hideko's POV, so like she does all this stuff, but because of the way that like the two parts are different, I actually had a hard time even like connecting to these characters being in love. Like I couldn't quite go there in general.
Well, because, you know, they are deceiving each other, and then jointly deceiving you.
Yeah. I have that issue across the board with like Fingersmith. But I haven't read it in a while, so maybe it would be interesting to revisit. It's been a hot minute since I've read that book. So,
well, Vera and I were talking earlier about Handmaiden, which we saw back in 2016, and how revisiting it for this podcast, we both liked it a lot better than we did at the time. I
actually did too.
Super hyped. Yeah, I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, we were super hyped when it came out, because I mean, I think at that point it had probably already come out in Korea. There was a lot of buzz. Chan-wook Park is a major director, so we were like, whoa, this is gonna be great. And then we saw it and we were like, it's okay.
I think that's because it's like it's gorgeousness, and the good stuff is in that stuff that I think jumps out on a second view, and it's the quieter stuff, and just like really looking at the mise en scène, and like really looking at like that formal stuff versus like I think walking out of the theater you kind of just remember twists, octopus, sex scene. There's so much spectacle. And for someone that might, for a lot of people I think that was like wow, and I think for us we first were like whoa.
And
like,
it is a movie
not what
where,
I expected.
You know, the people creating making spectacle out of women are the bad guys. So,
Right.
it is...
Yeah.
It always is towing that line where you're like, this movie is made by a man. This is its subject matter. Is this good? Or,
Right.
is there something exploitative about this?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I find I'm like very protective about like lesbian sex scenes in cinema in general because of how it's just so easily like a male erotica fantasy.
Yeah.
So, definitely that's how, I mean.
There's a lot of men making these movies.
Yeah.
Which we won't talk about.
So whenever there is any kind of like sex scene, I mean, for like two women, I'm always like, what kind of lens are we looking through?
Here's the thing. There's been like a lot of sex in
general,
film
yes.
since the dawn of film.
Yes.
In all kinds of movies, from porn to just regular old movies. And like, the majority of it is heterosexual. So once you actually get to actually having like queer movies and like what that experience is, everybody, like there are really just tons of bad sex scenes in cinema. So I think what I'm getting at is that there needs to be like way more gay movies.
Yeah.
So that there's all kinds
hyper focused on the
everybody
sex,
gets like super hyper focused on like, is this realistic? I'm like, well, I don't know, it's a movie. Is sex in movies ever realistic? Like, no, it's not really.
Yeah.
It's not.
But I mean, you are dealing a lot of times with fantasies and people's sexual fantasies, and so there are sort of different ways of filming them and different types of fantasies that you see. And so again, like a male erotica lesbian fantasy is like, yes, they're scissoring. And it's like, I get really like protective of like what you see. So like for the fact that this is part of the story and like it is kind of like supposed to be this way doesn't quite make it. Like maybe it's okay for part part 2, right? Maybe you give it a pass, but then like in part 3, the two characters escape and they sort of reconnect and they are kind of like getting sexual again at the end, and like what you get is like kinky sucking on those Benoit balls.
They are like formally too, also like mimicking actual art. Again.
That's cool. Yeah. But, however, a random man watching this movie, a random audience member, you can't expect everyone to be so knowledgeable about the art form of cinema and whatnot that we are discussing here. But, like, a random dude's going to see that movie and be like, fuck, that's hot.
Benoit balls.
Yeah. And, like...
Not everyone.
Not everyone, but, like, some are. And so, therefore, you're like, I'm like, ooh, really? That's just like my opinion. However, just quick note, the director is a man. However, like when they filmed the sex scenes, like literally like no one was in the room except for a female boom operator, and he directed them via like a walkie-talkie and stuff.
Okay.
And, like,
that's good.
It was just like Blue is the Warmest Color where they were like tortured for 2 weeks.
Oh
yeah.
It was not.
Okay.
Not one of the movies we will be talking about,
which I also haven't seen.
I haven't seen that one.
I did not wish to see it.
No desire for it.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, so Handmaiden, we liked it on the second time.
Yeah, I do like it. I mean,
it's a great achievement, and I think for a certain audience member who like really appreciates those kind of meta filmmaking, like this is great art for sure. And yeah.
All right, so just a quick plug for if you're interested in squid sex.
Of course, we always are.
Quick plug for this Spanish movie called Elisa and Marcela, which was on Netflix. It might still be, but it is based on a true story. It's like black and white, and there are some kinky sex scenes, one including milk and one including a squid, where I was very concerned about because it was literally like it was a dead squid.
Oh no.
So it was like for their dinner, and it was like, and then they just decided to have sex, and then they just used it as a prop for their sex.
Did they then eat it for dinner?
I was very worried about all of it.
Okay.
All of it.
I don't know what to think.
So there you go. All right, moving on.
I appreciate this prompt because I liked revisiting this movie.
Yeah.
And I know like tons of people loved it when it came out. Like lots of our friends talking about it.
Yeah. And at the time I was just like, no, what? And I like it a lot more now. All right, next movie that we can talk about just
we
jumping.
just wanted to talk about more because we like them.
It's just so striking that this has become a trend.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it was the double whammy of Carol and Handmaiden that made this a trend, or if it's just like cultural forces combining to make this a trend. But like there have been so many now like lesbian period dramas that I cannot keep up with them.
Well, here's the thing, right?
Yes.
Wait, I want to like do this off the top.
Katie's rant corner.
No, it's not a rant. It's just like just before we get into it, right? Because there's like, there's like a burden of representation, right?
Yes.
In queer cinema and media. And I think it is important to just talk about that a lot of times, we've gotten to the point now, and of course, The Handmaiden is not part of this, where the majority of the Corset lesbian movies are all white women, and like it kind of in the Hollywood system maybe, and people are like, we're actually at the point where I'm just seeing a lot of people go like, if I see one more couple of white ladies in corset,
old-timey white ladies,
like
on a beach,
yearning lesbians, like I'm gonna scream, right? And like I just want to put like my perspective on that, and I think as other people share this as well, it's not like it's my unique perspective, but like that's the whole problem with like that there isn't enough of this, and you have to like really go seek out smaller art and things elsewhere that's like harder to find with like these bigger movies, because like there are like 10 Batmans. I can't have like 10 like yearning corseted lesbians, but like the thing is like we need like more stuff, so like I get a little annoyed whenever I see like if I see one more of these movies I'm gonna scream, and I'm like, well, we need more of everything, more like diverse everything, so like I just wanted to say that off the top, that like I like the trend is fun and I like it. I don't need it to stop, but we need there to be like more things, so that it's not just like this like sort of thing that I think connects all of these together, which is this sort of, and I think this is what we'll talk about specifically with like the reaction to Carol, but each of these movies kind of has this like thing where people look at them and go like, cold. Yeah. And it's like distancing, cold, yearning people,
tasteful
in like maybe a cold, windy place or something. And it's like it's just this very specific thing for these, and they're like unhappy. You know what I mean?
Someone's probably
like
depressed.
These old,
depressed
tiny,
white ladies.
Depressed, cold. Lesbians that we're going to talk about now. So like the Handmaiden doesn't quite fall into that category, but there is like a distinct kind of quality.
It amusingly plays with it.
Exactly.
Hideko at first seems like the depressed.
But she's not cold. It's set during a warm time period.
So I just want to say like we're fully kind of like cognizant of like this trend is kind of like this little thing, and that there are people who are frustrated with it, but that is just to do with the fact that there needs to be more stuff that exists, not necessarily that they need to stop making old-timey corset.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy the old-timey corset movie in general. I definitely enjoy this trend of having the women-loving women in the corsets. Like, this is a good time to me. It's true that, like, the new crop of them, and we'll get to this when we eventually talk about Ammonite, but, like, I do feel like we're getting to like a watered down place.
Yeah, they could be more fun. Have some fucking fun.
Yeah,
has anybody seen Tipping the Velvet? Like, fuck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that I feel like maybe because this is almost solidifying now into a genre with its own tropes, like beach and yearning, as Katie says, and cold. And artists that you kind of want, you do find yourself just wanting, the breadth of experience, even in this very limited white ladies in corsets. Yeah. Like there's more, there's so much more.
Maybe like a Bridgerton vibe.
Oh like, my god, I'm sure it's coming. And certainly Bridgerton needs to put some gay people in it. Jesus.
Actually, maybe that's Dickinson.
Oh.
Dickinson is an intriguing example. Yeah, where it's having a lot of fun with the period.
Yeah.
Wow.
Making the past feel much more accessible and present, and not like this weird fantasy land where everyone is depressed and by the beach.
I want to talk about...
Carol.
Well, no. I think it's time to talk about depressed ladies on a beach.
Okay.
So is that which portrait?
I think we could double up Portrait of a Lady on Fire and
Ammonite.
As we mentioned, they are cold ladies on beaches.
And Portrait of a Lady on Fire is the only one in this little curated list we have here that is actually directed by a female director.
Céline Sciamma.
Yeah.
Who won Best Screenplay at Cannes. Woo!
Yeah, and the movie lost to Parasite, which has some interesting connections, we thought, with the Handmaiden as far as class.
Yes.
Yeah.
And secret basements.
Parasite.
Yeah. Twists.
Don't tell anybody.
Sorry.
I haven't seen it. Don't tell anybody I haven't seen it yet.
You're the only one who's saying it.
Oh, no.
All right, so Portrait of a Lady on Fire,
It really reminds me in setup, actually, of The Handmaiden, in that you have this kind of idea of deception and pretense. The main character, Marianne, is hired to paint the portrait of a lady who is not on fire yet.
No.
Eloise. And Eloise does not wish to be married, and hence she does not want her portrait painted because this portrait is going to be shared with her potential husband. So Marianne has to pretend to be her companion for walks and just kind of consume her face with her eyes during the walks and then paint her portrait in secret. That is... It reminds me in some ways of what Suki is trying to do with Hideko. This sense of, like possessing someone without their knowledge. And of course, there ends up being real feeling here, and the deception collapses.
Yeah, I mean, immediately I'm like, more drawn to this kind of story as far as how, like, nobody came in specifically to create some kind of love situation. I mean, obviously, like, Suki didn't mean to fall in love with Hideko, or vice versa, but still, like, there was, like, a necessary seduction there via, like, the Count, but here it's like, she's here to do a job, paint the portrait.
She's great at her job.
Yeah.
I feel like part of my love of Portrait of a Lady on Fire is, like, a competence porn, because Marianne is like a really good painter, and she like just immediately takes control of the situation. It's like a really weird situation, and she knows it's weird and doesn't really like it, but she's like able to do it, and like feels sort of bad about it, but like can do it. And I don't know. I was just immediately like team Marianne for this movie, because I was like, girl, that's a great portrait. Well done. Yeah. Triumphing over the obstacles.
But what I really loved about this movie was the lack of men. No, I'm just kidding.
I was actually going to bring that up, because this movie, I think of all of them, has the smallest on-screen time of men. Men are not in this movie.
Yeah, there's like 2 lines
and
or
in
something.
fact, like, a man shows up at the end, and that's sort of
you're
like and you're like, what is that?
Yeah, this movie's indifference to men is wonderful.
Yeah.
And I also like that Portrait kind of opens it up. So it's, I mean, the lesbian love affair obviously gives, like, all these movies kind of allows them to find their freedom and find their sense of identity and create this beautiful space for just the two of them. But in Portrait, it also creates space for their maid, who is just kind of like the only other major character in the movie is Eloise's mom, who leaves. She goes off for 5 days, leaving our 2 main characters alone to paint. Unsupervised. But I love that also the maid kind of gets to experience that freedom. You have these wonderful scenes where she's just kind of like hanging out in the kitchen with the 2 lovers doing her needlepoint, just like chilling. And I thought that was nice, that you actually have this collapsing of class, similarly to Handmaiden, but in this way that's just sort of inclusive. Like, hey, everybody can enjoy this. Until the men come back.
Yeah, and it's just like their house is located like at the edge of a cliff or something, or somewhere like really remote, clearly.
Really, really remote.
And the the movie is just very, like, you feel like it's its own universe. They go for these, like, walks. There's just no one around. It's just them and, like, a cliff and wind and the ocean.
And Eloise's sister died by suicide off that cliff. So that whenever they're on that cliff, you're like, oh no.
Yeah, 'cause she's cold and unhappy.
You're worried, throughout the movie.
And they there's like there's no soundtrack to this movie as well.
Yeah, it's a very quiet movie.
Quiet, which sort of also adds to, like, I don't know, like the way that she's, like, oppressed, I guess, like, by silence, by space. It's just, it's like old-timey problems.
But then you hear, like, very select, like, you hear Vivaldi at one point, and it's, like, important because then it sets up a final scene where you also hear Vivaldi.
Well, they go to a festival, which is all these women singing. It's gorgeous.
That singing is so, like, raises the hairs on the back of my neck. It's so beautiful. That's kind of like the titular scene.
Yeah, or she gets on fire.
This is the oldest set movie, right? Time period wise.
I guess. I mean, it's close with The Favorite, I think.
The Favorite is earlier. I didn't actually look up.
I didn't.
No, because this is old. This is like 1700s.
Oh, it is? It's not 1800s?
No.
Okay, then maybe.
Yeah, judging by the gown, I think 18th century.
It was nice, the gowns.
Yeah, that green gown is doing a lot of work.
And then when it's painted, it's gorgeous.
And you have some of the same kind of, like, role-playing and mirroring that the Handmaiden was doing, and that Marianne sometimes models the gown herself in order to paint it during that period when Eloise doesn't know about the painting.
Right.
So I thought that was fun to see, whenever one of the lovers wears the other's clothing, that's the sign of them, growing closer.
Yeah. But I mean, as far as filmmaking goes, it's just amazing. Like, I think this movie and Carol have a lot in common as far as, like, the classic, and I guess it's, like, what ultimately I like in like one of these kind of queer romances, which is that looks and kisses say so much more than big old scissoring sex scene. So
I saw an interview with Céline Sciamma, who is French, saying that she's taken this movie around the world and everybody talks about it as so erotic and swoon-worthy. And then in France, people are like, oh, it's
there's no sex scene.
Yeah.
Where's the sex scene?
They're like, oh, it's
France.
So prudish, this movie.
just one armpit.
I mean, should we discuss that?
The armpit.
The armpit.
Armpit sex.
I feel like every one of these, except for maybe Carol, has something to be like, is it problematic or not?
Art.
I mean, so this movie does not have any kind of, like, overt, like, they don't really have sex.
No,
like,
I think you mostly see the afterglow.
Yeah, you see the afterglow, you see kind of, like, before or whatever. And like I said, all that stuff is super, like, in my opinion, extremely well done. Very, like, sensual and intimate and whatnot. And, there's so much staring at each other.
Well, because it's about the act of looking. It's about the artist looking at the subject, and the subject is looking back, and she's seeing the artist. And
sometimes she's looking at us, and then we're looking at her.
Very sexy.
And there's like a whole meta layer of this guy's, which I feel like I maybe knew at the time, but was like, whoa, when I researched it, which is that...
The director?
Yeah, the director and Eloise, the subject of the lady. Painting and film... they had a relationship. They've since broken up, which is interesting because the last shot of the movie is literally like Marianne looking at Eloise, broken up, remembering their love affair, and you just stare, and the movie kind of puts you in the shoes of the former lover, Marianne / Céline Sciamma. It's a very personal film, which I think kind of distinguishes it from these others we've sort of been talking about, they're all directed by men otherwise. Here is a queer female director making a movie about someone who she actually was dating.
So maybe the quote-unquote sex scene is something they used to do IRL, which is put drugs in your armpit?
Yep.
Like
no doubt.
Rub it in there?
There's that's like what the thing of this movie is. Like it's not really like the thing of this movie, but like the sort of quote unquote sexy thing in this movie is there's this close up shot of that, like what Vera just said, like rubbing these drugs into your armpit.
Finger in
pit.
armpit.
It's so close up that it looks like, being fingered.
Of a JJ,
yeah. But it is an armpit. But you don't know it at first, and you're like, what's happened? And then it pulls back, and you're like, armpit, interesting.
Yeah.
It's a drug to stop time, much like a painting stops time. Whoa.
But I mean, like, is that a typical place to put your drugs?
I don't know. I wasn't.
I think it was just kind
a French lady in the 18th century.
I read a quote from her that said it was kind of jokey. That was just like she had this image in her head, and then the drug thing came after the fact, and then she joked that that's where your second clitoris is.
Oh.
That was what she said. She said, as everyone knows.
Okay.
That's where it is.
All right.
We're learning a lot about Celine.
Yeah, I think this is
I think
really...
it was a joke. It might have been translated or something from
Sounds
French.
like it's something deep and personal to her.
But yeah, no, this movie just feels, I don't know, you can, there's something maybe sometimes intangible about it, but the fact that there are queer people behind the camera and in front of the camera makes a little difference.
Yes.
Especially when you know they bang.
Yo.
Sorry. I love a story.
That's extra.
I love the goss.
But yeah, it's a really beautiful movie.
All right. So, I think it's available on Hulu. Just FYI. Ammonite, cold ladies on beaches.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
These ones are not painting. They are excavating fossils.
This is the most recent that we have seen.
Yes.
There is
from
that other
2020.
one that's floating out there right now from this year.
The World to Come.
Right, which we have not seen.
We have not seen
so
it.
we cannot talk about it.
But that's how many of these are now getting pumped out, is that you can't even keep up.
Yeah. Okay. Seashells and fossils. Seashells.
Yep.
Yeah. This is based on a...
Shearsha.
Oh, no.
Shearsha shells.
No.
Oh, God, here we go.
Oh, no.
Oh, my God, help.
This is based on a real person.
Yes.
So who made this movie?
Francis Lee.
And it stars Kate Winslet and Saoirse Ronan.
Yes. Francis Lee's a gay man.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also Todd.
Much like Todd Haynes.
Carol.
Yes.
So, but they are still mans.
Yes, they are.
Based on a real person.
Yes.
But not a source.
Not a source.
And Mary Anning's family was like, oh, okay.
Oh, interesting.
There's no evidence she was queer, but as Francis Lee says, there's no evidence she wasn't.
So there you go.
Wow. Can we just retell every story this way then from now on?
This is when I think people have hit the wall and started complaining, which is what I wanted to start off the top with. I did not hate this movie, but it is not that great in the sense that it is just kind of boring in a way that I think slow movies like Portrait of a Lady on Fire, they didn't feel that way. I think one of the issues is not it's not really the setting, like that people are sick of, like it's the cold
beach
distancey
rocks.
Thing. I don't know if they have the best chemistry.
Yeah.
Okay, and
I think that's maybe the biggest issue.
That is wacky. You'd think maybe they would,
but also
they didn't.
I mean, I personally had a hard time connecting to the main person in this movie, which is the Kate Winslet.
Yeah, and
character.
I like a hard to like character.
Yeah. She wasn't really redeeming.
She's like a fossil.
She is very much like a fossil. She's really hard to crack. Mm-hmm. I mean, well, maybe fossils are easy to crack because they're old, but her shell is just
so thick.
So thick.
Movie, it's I don't need to see her peeing on the beach and then eat a sandwich. It's kind of really what's about to happen. It's I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say so much as it like it sets up this like world that is very like that way, and you know, then Saoirse Ronan comes in, and you know, it becomes a little bit of a fanfic where it's like she has a fever, and there's literally only one bed. Like I was like, we all turned to each other and we're like, oh my god, there's only one bed. Like, what's gonna happen?
I think you know what's gonna happen.
But yeah, like I don't know necessarily what historically it is about like gay women that like there's these movies are all like this, where it's like, why isn't anybody having any fun whatsoever? That it's somehow sad, and like, you know, they live in this time period obviously that's very oppressive, and you can't be like open and stuff like that. So it is, you know, it is not great. Obviously, I'm not saying like every movie needs to be like Tipping the Velvet or something like that. But like, I feel like that's where the thing comes. Once you finally have gotten to this movie, you're like, Jesus Christ, everybody's really depressed all the time. Like, it's so like peeing on the rock, and then their like relationship is kind of like all of a sudden sex scenes that kind of just happen. You're like, whoa, it just kind of like explodes.
I completely agree.
I do like the main sex scene in this movie slightly more than some of the other movies, except for maybe Carol. Only because of like just the behind the scenes is really interesting, that it was like Kate Winslet choreographed the whole thing and like made them do it on Saoirse Ronan's birthday. And it, you know, it's not as like distancing as something like The Handmaiden to me, but obviously we talked about how that has many layers to it, so that's its own separate thing. This just kind of felt like really desperate, and like I liked that about it. It was all right. It was good-ish. It didn't have anything that like really took me out of it, like some of the other movies.
I mean, I thought, well, you raised a lot of really interesting points. You talked about how, well, now I can't say what you talked about, but they were all interesting points.
Oh,
no, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Wait, let me remember. Hold on. Possibly I remember. So you talked about how, like, you know, the peeing on the rock and the eating a sandwich and whatever. I think a lot of it is strictly to do with Mary Anning's character, where in, like, apologies for this, but, like, she seems like a bitch and you can't change her. Like,
but that's okay.
That's, like, you meet her ex.
She's very set in her ways.
Fiona Shaw.
Fiona Shaw was the bright spot of this movie. Like, literally.
That was the movie.
Is more fun.
Yeah.
Why wasn't that the thing?
Yeah.
But I'm like, she clearly couldn't, like, she's a bitch who can't be changed. She can't, like, look at, you could have been with Fiona Shaw. You could have been happy there. Nope. Rocks, cold, peeing on
I don't know.
beach. And
I did rewatch this one.
And then you know, Saoirse's character, like she has like a really great setup at the end where, like, you know, it's all about her husband is like cool with it and he's not around anyway.
He's too busy with fossils.
He's into fossils. He's fine with this. Saoirse's going around like being like, we're going to be gay in front of our maids and servants, and that's totally cool. They're just, like, here, and it's fine.
London pad.
Yeah, she's, like, literally, like, here, you can move in, and, like, here's your setup, and we'll be together. Yay, this is great. Granted, like, her fossils are in her cold beach, so it's hard for her to, like, do her work, which she loves the most, clearly, and, like, the fossils are her OTP. Right. So I get that why she wouldn't choose this, but, like, she does have the option to be, like, with somebody and be who she is openly, I guess, for the most part, in that household at least. And like, she can't do it just because of her, like, the way that her character is. So I mean, like, she's just that kind of person. So it is hard. And I think I had a hard time connecting to her as like a character. I can't be like, oh my God, their love is so great, when I'm like, she's kind of like really mean and like, I mean, she smiled like once when they did the swimming. I
can't believe you're asking Kate Winslet's character to smile more.
I mean,
she was happy once, I should say. She was happy once.
We like all kinds of characters and like that, but this, like, and you don't have to be like lovable to love a character.
I'm just saying that, like, for me, she like
it sounds like she frustrated you.
She frustrated me. Like
her inability to change.
Yes, frustrated me.
To try to
because
change.
I find that really hard to connect with. Even in Portrait of a Lady on Fire, we got happiness between them.
But then, of course, yes,
they
still go their separate ways.
Yes.
So, I mean, there is this kind of like, you don't want the status quo. That's why Carol is such an exciting movie, because they do find each other at the end. And Ammonite is a strange one in that it has this ambiguous ending where it seems like they're probably breaking up, but maybe...
I think they are.
Hopefully in slightly more amicable terms.
Katie also talked about how the sex scene, like their sex scenes came out of like nowhere and
the first
quite
one.
Strong, I thought. I completely agree. For me, like the second one, I do still kind of like have, I don't know if it's like an issue, but like I'm not 100% like sold on it. Like I like all of it. Like I like that it was choreographed, by Kate Winslet, which is very similar to what happened in Disobedience with Rachel Weisz being the producer.
Mm-hmm. These are both straight ladies.
Okay.
To point out if that's or what do we know?
Right.
Who knows?
How can we be
don't.
sure? Publicly straight.
Yeah, there's no evidence that they're not.
Right.
But
thanks, Francis Lee.
There's no evidence that.
Yeah.
So I guess I maybe I take that back because I can't really know, but like by publicly saying like they are straight, that is a perspective of her. Like I don't know what her experiences are of her choreographing this sex scene is what I'm trying to say, basically.
Well, anyway, I slightly like the tingling of like my protectiveness did get slightly there for that sex scene, just because like I was like, oh, this is a little bit like too sexy.
The one against the wall.
Because like the like sitting on the face.
Yeah,
is that
sitting
the same
on
one?
the face. Yeah, that's the same
People
one.
listening to this. That's sitting on the face. Yeah. Is that the one?
Yeah, because again, I'm like you're veering like there's. I just don't want to enter into like male fantasies. It could be female fantasies too. It's fine. It's just like again, I worry about. But then again, I'm like. Dudes aren't like gonna be lining up to go see this movie.
No
one's lining up.
No one's lining up. To be honest.
So anyway, that's Ammonite.
Yeah.
So things that I liked about it, Kate Winslet had amazing little boots. She had really great shoes.
I loved her mom.
Gemma Jones, best. We love her.
From Gentleman Jack.
Gentleman Jack and other things. She's like fantastic.
She's great at being the mother figure for queer ladies.
And she had these like little figurines that she was obsessed with, which is a really good connection with.
TV's doing it. Sorry, I don't mean to really interrupt you, but TV's doing it. TV's doing what I've been asking for. Gentleman Jack, that's another one.
Gentleman Jack is a good example.
Gentleman Jack
having a lot
they
of
have
fun.
corsets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
some of them are sad.
Yeah.
Some of them are having fun.
TV's doing everything better.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Anyway, I was saying that Gemma Jones was like has these little figurines that are
little porcelain dogs
that represent her dead children,
right?
Which is very similar to the bunnies in The Favorite,
which we will now talk about.
Now. Okay, so The Favorite, directed by Yorgos Lanthimos. He's Greek, right?
He's Greek.
Yeah. So, I mean, Katie, you asked for it to be fun, and this is certainly fun.
Oh, well, yeah.
They're in corsets and they're having fun.
You're right.
However, this one has tricks.
I would say this is the darkest of the movies.
It is the darkest and, like, the least happiest for them at the end.
Just the most, like, misanthropic. Like, people suck. Even these three women suck.
I mean, yeah, for sure. It is kind of different because it's not specifically just like about like
a love affair.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
There's a love triangle.
Yeah, a love triangle and a lot of again performance and deception and
power games.
Power games is like that's the whole thing. The whole thing is about power. I love that it's between these women. That's different. And also, of course, like the country, because it's about England in the oldie times, and there's a queen, and there are her court and subjects and whatnot. So we're talking about Queen Anne, played by Olivia Colman, in her Oscar-winning role. She was really fucking fantastic in this movie.
Yes.
Really great. And then there's like Emma Stone, Abigail, the kind of like upstart who wants to get in on that action, and Queen Anne's loyal friend and
lover,
gal pal,
sometime abuser,
Lady Sarah. I was gonna say Marburg.
I know.
Now you can say Marlborough.
I know. It is confusing.
If you haven't listened to our Salem Patreon podcast,
Yeah.
here is referencing her inability to say Lucy Wallace's character's name in Salem, which is Marburg. And now you got me doing it.
Marlborough.
This is Marlborough. Now you got it, the right one here.
Yeah. So this movie is super fun, and it gives you this great gift, which is
Rachel Weisz,
just in general.
The gift of
What?
Rachel Weisz.
But Rachel
what were you gonna
Weisz
say?
specifically in these men's clothes of the time period.
Yeah.
All the
shooting
costuming
guns.
is amazing.
So fucking good.
This is, I think, one of the only movies on our list that does have a little bit of gender play. That Lady Sarah dresses up as a man
A little bit.
sometimes.
The Handmaiden ended with them dressing up as dudes
That's true.
to get out
Yeah,
on
as
a
a subterfuge.
big cruise boat
Yeah.
or whatever it was, a ship of some kind.
But Lady Sarah, you feel that her dressing as a man is part of her. You know, she is kind of secretly running England.
Yeah.
And her dressing up as a man is her, kind of privately asserting
Yes.
that power.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, she has the queen's ear and other body parts.
Body parts. I was just gonna say.
And so she kind of influences her to make certain decisions. And then, again, that's why she wears the pants in the relationship.
And this is a secret, but at the same time, like, all the men of the court know about it.
Yeah.
I would say this movie is kind of interesting in that I don't really get the sense. I mean, I guess it's part of the plot a little bit, but for the most part, like, them having sex with each other is not like a shameful thing. It's, it turns out, of course, that like it is eventually used to blackmail the queen, but it takes like the whole movie for it to kind of be framed in that light.
Yeah. And yeah, like Emma Stone's character is comes in and she's trying to figure out how to get the queen's favor, and
Just how to survive at
yeah,
first,
I mean,
really.
she needs to.
Yeah.
Yes, it's kind of very similar to Suki in Handmaiden, where she's like from a poor kind of situation, and she needs to do this in order to survive, basically. And so she discovers that the queen and Lady Sarah are lovers, and so she's like, okay, I'll get in on that, and I'll usurp her as the favorite.
Oh, that's the title of the movie.
So shenanigans transpire and whatnot. But yeah, there's no like a overt sort of like overt sex scenes. There is
Not
some
in the
sort
way.
of there's intimate touching of.
Yeah.
There's a lot of massaging
There's
of
massaging
gouty
of,
legs.
So yeah, so much
Gouty legs.
like the armpit sex
Oh, no.
Or the
from the
tooth
previous one.
filing.
The tooth filing. This is massaging of a gouty leg. I mean, at the end of the movie becomes like an allegory for like sucking a dick.
Yes.
Basically, and that's in a shameful way. That was quite amazing as an ending, of course, I thought. But yeah, the gouty leg is massaged a lot.
I think when we were looking at some of the list of movies to talk about with The Handmaiden, like to your point that each one sort of and the discourse around them, that like Portrait of a Lady on Fire and Carol, among some others, like The Handmaiden have these sort of like set piece sex scenes that are just discoursed to death. And The Favorite doesn't really have one of those.
Yeah, I feel like the discourse was maybe just like about the final scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Rachel Weisz
It
does have one, if we want to talk about Disobedience.
Yes. I mean, it was an excuse to talk about Disobedience, really.
That's a segue.
This was like a 1-2 for like Rachel Weisz
Fans,
song.
yeah.
I don't know. She was starring as this queer lady in both movies, and it was kind of like what did we do to deserve this?
It was a gift.
It was a gift. It was straight up a gift.
A gift to us.
So Disobedience really had like a sex scene that everybody talked about, but it is based on a book. It is directed by Sébastien Lelio, and it is set during the winter, and it is cold.
They're very cold and
very
miserable.
Cold. Yes. So it goes with Carol in that sense, where the setting is, the winter setting is supposed to be oppressive for these characters. Okay, it is part of it. Disobedience does not, however, have Christmas because they are Jewish.
It's also the reason we didn't include it in our main list of movies is that it is
it's very modern.
Not a
it's
period
very
piece.
Modern.
It is contemporary.
Yeah, so it is about a Hasidic community in London, I believe, or in England.
Yes.
And Rachel Weisz is ex-member, I guess. She lives a secular life. She had a relationship with Rachel McAdams when they were small, and she comes back for a funeral and rekindles things. Meanwhile, Rachel McAdams' character is married to also their friend from childhood, I guess, and they're trying to have a baby, and that is the crux of the plot, basically. So a lot of it is about will Rachel McAdams, follow her feelings or not? And spoiler, she does.
Hey, she disobeys.
So, Rachel Weisz is a photographer here.
Yes.
And that's very similar to Carol. It is interesting, again, like, you gotta see the photos, like, you're looking through the lens of the photographer, and you, the audience member, are looking through the lens at the, it's all meta.
We always need this. I'm not sure why, but yeah. I mean, there is something very romantic, of course, of the artist looking at their love.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the shots that Therese does of Carol are quite something.
Yes.
So, Disobedience, a lot of, like, twists and turns as far as the relationship between Esti and Ronit. But it ultimately ends up with Ronit, who's Rachel Weisz, asking her to go into town, and they get into a hotel room, and they bang. And it's a very important, like, big release. So let's quickly talk about it, because it did stir some things.
Right. Yeah. And this is sort of what we're talking about with all of these movies, is that the big sex scenes always get talked about to pieces, and there's always, like, something in there. And in Disobedience, it is about this sort of exchange of fluid via spit.
Yeah. Rachel Weisz spits into Rachel McAdams' mouth during the sex scene, and there's so much more that's around that part.
But who remembers it?
And it's sort of like you get a sort of symbolism of it, and you sort of understand what that's all about. But that's the same thing. It's just one of those things where it's like, if something doesn't appeal to you personally in a sex scene, like, it doesn't mean it's bad. That's kind of what I'm wanted to kind of get at, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, like,
doesn't make it a bad sex scene just because you don't like this one part of it. If, like, other people do, because it does feel intimate in a very specific way.
There's so much going on for these two characters. So Rachel McAdams has been trying to have a baby with her husband, and, like, you see them have a sex scene previously. The sex scene between the two Rachels is just, like, so different because it is, like, a long time sort of release. And it's not like you see stuff, but it's very, I don't know, I just found it, like, really beautiful, like, how they did it. Again, the discourse is that, like, she spits in her mouth, and that either works for you or it doesn't.
That's basically
it's definitely
it.
Not,
it's not that simple. I mean, it's not that hard, like, with the discourse. It's literally, like, some people are like, ew, this is gross. She spit in her mouth. Like, that's, like, the extent.
My, like, my spidey sense for,
it's
like...
a short discourse.
Yeah.
Well, my spidey sense for, like, protectiveness of this sex scene does not come up.
Yeah,
like,
this seems like your favorite. You're talking about it in much warmer terms.
I think it's really well done. Really, like, natural. The chemistry between them is, like, off the fucking charts.
Yeah.
Nothing's awkward about it. I'll get to the spit, like, in a second. But nothing's awkward about the rest of it, okay? It's incredibly fucking sexy when she takes her wig off. Like, it's just so good all around. There's a lot of, like, just, like, good kissing, just, like, really good stuff. And the spitting in the mouth, I certainly haven't seen it in anything else, and just in general.
In like a mainstream movie.
In any kind of mainstream movie, in a sex scene, that's not a thing that like I've ever seen. And
it's
therefore,
arresting, yeah.
Yeah, it's very like, different. But like in the context of the movie, you get it because it's like real neat, like that's how she impregnates Esty. You know? It's like a fanfic. Because then, like, after that sex scene, Esty is pregnant.
Yep.
So it's like basically
touch.
like, it's like basically kind of like that, yeah. Again, like, it's either your thing or it's not. You can try to ignore that part because everything else around it is awesome. There is also, like, part of it is that also Esty, like, Ronan goes down on her and Esty has an orgasm, and it's like a lot of not discourse, but a lot of interviews, like, we're talking about how, like, that is like her first orgasm ever. Like, she doesn't have that with her husband or whatever. So it was like a really big deal. And so you understand it. I guess to me, like, the movie, besides that sex scene, is just so many, like, good stares at each other, the longing looks, even the fucking poster. I'm like looking at the poster right now. It is so good.
The theme is yearning.
Yeah. And it's good. It's very
strange.
good.
What you're saying about the sex scene that I think is important is you're explaining how it is meaningful to the characters in its form.
It is very meaningful to the characters.
And meaningful to the plot in terms of her journey to get pregnant.
And if you want to see somebody, like, so in love with someone, it is after that when Rachel Weisz is, like, sitting there just, like, looking at McAdams with this, like, face of just, I love you so much. And she takes her photo and stuff.
Of course. And that way the longing is, like, frozen forever.
Yes.
Beautiful thing.
Like a painting?
A
Wow.
photo is just a painting that's small.
It could be big,
Yeah, you're right.
Light.
Yes.
Not paint.
Whoa, man. Whoa.
Paint.
So that's a good one, though.
Yeah.
And, it is, the ending is a little ambiguous. I mean, it's happy in the sense that Esty gets a baby.
That's the thing.
That's
A lot of these have ambiguous endings or kind of sad endings. It's just a lot of cold, sad lesbians.
Yeah, except for Carol.
Carol.
Our final
Which
one.
We have talked about.
We've talked about throughout this whole thing.
Yeah.
And we've talked about, Kana, you had, our old podcast had a really good episode
Carol
about
episode.
it. However, that's no longer available.
No.
Sad.
Oh.
But as I said before, it was our greatest listened to episode at the time.
Oh, nice. Well,
because Carol's really awesome.
any excuse to talk about Carol, really.
Yeah. So there's some lesbians in it. They stare at each other.
Directed by Todd Haynes.
The end.
Starring Cate Blanchett and Rooney Mara.
Yes.
Set in New York in the 50s.
Yes.
Yes.
Based on the novel The Price of Salt by Patricia Highsmith.
Yes.
Who had 300 snails. And she carried them around in her purse, and she fed them little lettuce. That is a fact about Patricia Highsmith.
Whoa.
It's an amazing Patricia Highsmith fact. Thank you.
That's a lot of snails.
Yeah. So she's a very complicated person. Let's not get into it. However, Carol is an amazing, amazing movie. I think it's like the most art movie of the lot. Just because
The most art?
The most art.
Just, yes, on a scale of 1 to...
They are pretty
looks,
art.
It looks
the
like...
Handmaiden is really big. They're all very arty.
Except
guess.
for Ammonite.
Except for Ammonite.
It looks like a rock. It looks like a fossil not dug up yet.
I think what you're trying to say is it's your favorite, maybe.
It is my favorite, but
Not your favorite.
I love the favorite too. No, but I mean, I love Carol, like, all around. I was extremely offended by its reception at the time.
Right, which is the thing that we've kind of been hitting on.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the first movie that,
Yes.
for in this category.
But everybody accepted Call Me By Your Name at the time.
Well, it's sunny.
It's sunny. People accept dudes, fucking peaches. But, yeah, the women are cold.
the bigger thing that kind of people were talking about at the time in the discourse was sort of that, you know, this was an amazing masterpiece by Todd Haynes. And it did not get the Oscar attention that Brokeback Mountain did, which, is about men.
Yep. And yearning. And it's cold.
Yearning and sad.
It is cold, yeah.
And cold. And it just kind of got snubbed because people, like, for some reason, when it comes to women, just, like, it reads as... Like, we keep saying cold. It is literally cold because it's winter and Christmas is really, but like that, it doesn't actually feel that way when you watch the movie.
Because they're inside really houses where it's warm.
Like, and you're actually really watching this relationship, which is really beautiful. So it's sort of frustrating that it didn't get the attention in the same way as something like a Brokeback Mountain.
Yeah, but I mean, literally, like, the way the movie looks, like, the set design, the costumes, like Carol's iconic fur coat, the color scheme, the photography of, you're looking constantly, like, from the outside in, you're looking through foggy windows, car windows, house windows. That's supposed to, like, mimic photography of the time, of, like, people taking, like, specific photographs that I don't remember now, I'm sorry, of the actual photographer who, like, did this, went around
like
New York.
Street photography.
And, like, took all these photos, and, like, this movie, like, literally looks like it.
It's a very, like, careful recreation of the past.
Exactly.
I think more than any of the movies on this list, it is as much about kind of the past as it is about the love affair.
And, the relationship between Carol and Therese, very good.
It is.
It is.
And like, because we're kind of pulling all of these movies out for their, like, set piece sex scenes. One of the ones that just has, like, a nice one, it's just, like, there's nothing in it that, like, is, like, here's the thing in it that we're going to pull out and discourse about for 100 years.
I think there's one line in the sex scene that people have discoursed about, which is that Carol, unbuttons Therese's, like, she sees her naked, and she's just like, you have such a young body. I'm so old, that kind of thing.
Well, the age difference is important.
Yeah, it is.
To the plot. You have these different power differentials, like, throughout these movies. Usually one of the characters is kind of in a position of power over the other, and then it switches over the course of the plot.
I mean, it kind of does.
And that happens in Carol,
too.
For sure.
And there is, like, the twist, I guess it has, like, a really amazing structure where it opens with them at a restaurant, and they're talking about something. They're interrupted by some dude who's like, hey, da, da, da. And then, like, later at the end of the movie, you find out that this was, like, a monumental moment where Carol confessed her love and asked Therese to move in with her. Like, it is fucking insane when you actually find out what that is.
Yeah, what that scene was that was interrupted by
some fucking man. Putting all these movies, like, in, like, a box together like this, like, you always, you pick out, like, certain, like, themes within the movies. Like, so, like, we talked about the little figurines representing dead children, and, like, the bunnies representing dead children from Ammonite and The Favorite. One thing that, like, costumes is really important, like, for Carol.
And I think in all these movies,
of course,
the costumes are doing a lot of work.
But specifically, like, part of her character, like, her fingernails. So, like, there was a really important, like, she wears these, like, red nail polish throughout the movie. And then, like, when she and Therese are, like, broken up, she has, like, nude nails. And so it was really interesting, the detail in Ammonite, like, Kate Winslet's fingers were all, like, constantly, like, fucked up from, like, digging in dirt for her fossils. So that made me think of, like, important, like, fingernail issues and Carol.
We've talked a lot through this discussion about Carol as having this happy ending as opposed to basically all the others, which feature either ambiguous, maybe they split up endings, or sad pining. Carol, which I remember when I first saw it, I felt a kind of dread throughout the movie. You're so aware of the smothering patriarchy in Carol that you just feel like this relationship is not to be. And of course, there is like a cost. Carol loses her daughter.
Which seems like something that she would never choose to do. Like that, she would choose to be with her daughter instead of
right. That's kind of what you expect. Yeah. Is that, and then that is the choice kind of being set up for Carol is that she either has to choose, between her daughter and her baby.
Just FYI, in the novel, she's constantly putting Therese to have like a little nap and give her milk and stuff.
Yeah, the kind of mommy-daughter role play is very strong in the book, and Todd Haynes has toned it down slightly.
It is there. There's a lot of hair brushing, like her.
Yeah, she remarks on the fact that her hair is so much Therese's hair is so much like her daughter's. But despite losing custody of her daughter, she does get to have this happy ending with Therese. And it feels very much like this gift handed to you at the end of the movie, which is these two women are willing to make the sacrifices to be together. And just like that little smile that Cate Blanchett gives at the end. That's why when people talk about Carol as being this kind of cold, subtle movie, you're like, that, this movie is maybe told in this kind of code, tiny smile, but that smile is so huge. That smile is earth-shaking. So
code.
I love that the word code came up at the very last possible minute of this movie, where we're like spend the whole time going like all of the like tinier things that things have been good. Which is just like since the dawn of cinema what like queer characters have been having to do.
Well, that's why it like registers so much to I guess also like people who like know or whatever, and maybe that's why like dude reviewers like found it cold, is like they didn't understand that like that tiny look, that little lingering touch is everything.
This is all we've had for so long. And maybe that's in part why then when we get the sex scenes we're like, wait, whoa. Exactly. We thought the sex was just gonna be teeth filing or like taking off your glove and touching hands. What is this now?
Yep.
This is quite literal.
Maybe, honestly. If you haven't seen these movies, go see them. Put them in your eyeballs.
And there are so many more, you guys. Yeah,
so
There's
many
Vita
more.
and Virginia. There's Summerland.
There's like a gazillion Emily Dickinson
Tell
things.
It to the Bees.
Yeah, these are just a few.
Yeah, there's more. This is a genre.
Yeah.
It's something.
If you like the favorite,
you
can see Dickinson the show. It's very similar.
Yes, Dickinson the show we could probably do a whole podcast about because it has a lot of ideas and is
really
kind of turning some of these tropes on their head.
Thank you, Catherine Janeway, for being our patron and suggesting this great minisode topic. Yeah, you can follow us on all this stuff and things.
Yes. We are at xenawarriorpodcast.com. You can find everything you could ever possibly want. We are on Apple Podcasts. We can subscribe and rate and leave reviews. And, you can listen wherever you're already listening and also on Spotify. And we are on Twitter at XenaWarriorPod and Facebook, etc., Xena Warrior Podcast. And you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/Xena Warrior Podcast, where we have just reached Salem in the Lucy Lawless IMDb experience. If you want to talk about more old-timey stuff, that's pretty old. And we'll be doing Ash vs. Evil Dead next, which is a return of Lucy to all of our Renaissance bros, family, everyone from Xena is here.
But no Renee, sad.
Yeah, almost everyone. They talked about trying to get her.
Bringing her,
So we'll be doing that next, so you can go check that out on Patreon. That's it.
The power.
The passion.
The podcast.